Tell me if you can hear me in the back. We're all good there? Okay, tremendous. How many of you are here today voluntarily? Oh, that's wonderful. Despite that fact, when you saw that we were going to have an hour and a half to talk about EPRs, did any one of you want to gouge your eyes out with pencils? Did anybody want to do that? Okay, some honest people in the back. That is definitely a response that is not abnormal. We are going to talk today about something perhaps that we corporately are a little resistant to doing. Sometimes we wonder, maybe, is this necessary? So we're going to talk about all that stuff today, and hopefully not only will you learn a little bit about writing today, but maybe we'll get some leadership and force development stuff thrown in here as well. So if you have a handout, flip open to the back page for me real quick. What I'm going to show you, it should just be the thing that says Headquarters 7th Army on the top. What I'm going to show you today is a real no-kidding performance report from 1943 on a guy named Omar Bradley. Anybody heard of Omar Bradley before? Famous World War II general? So flip open on the very back page and tell me, who is Bradley's raider? Patton. Who is his additional raider? Ike. Oh man, we have stacked the deck for Bradley on who's signing his report. Now when you flip open to the front page here, you'll see when it comes to making comments, writing good bullets, how did Patton do that? Well, it says matter of performance. The long list of matter of performance, he says one word. What's word's that? Superior, period. Hey, Patton, do you want to say anything else? No, not really. All right, how about where does he rank? Well, let me see. How many of officers of his grade are known to you? And where does he rank among those that are known to you? Number one, and I know all of them, so I'm done writing that too. Done. You want to say anything else? Nope. Then go ahead and promote him. If only it could be that easy for us. But I'm here to tell you, unfortunately, it's not going to be. We're not three-star generals. We're not leading armies across the fields of World War II Europe. And we don't have Patton and Eisenhower sign our reports. So it will be a little bit more difficult for us in that regard. Perhaps I have a difficult job today of convincing you that this matters. And so we'll try to do that as we go through the beginning here. Next. But let me give you some overview and disclaimer. So why is some random lieutenant colonel from Texas talking to you about how to write EPRs? It seems like someone from the FSS or A1 community should be doing that. Not some random disqualified pilot. But let me tell you why this has been something that I've done for now 4 or 5 years. I was at Dyess Air Force Base flying C-130s, had some back problems, got some back surgeries, and they decided, no more soup for you, you don't get to fly anymore. So they disqualified me from flying. That was very sad, yes. But then they decided, well, we still have you here, so what are we going to do with you? Does anybody have any ideas where a disqualified pilot sitting down in a wing somewhere might be useful? Make him the executive officer, yes, because that guy just does admin creep and your back can hurt and you can do that. So that guy did that, and then all of a sudden the squadron, the group, then wing, then numbered Air Force general decided that was a good idea. So over the course of 4 or 5 years, I did a whole lot of executive officer jobs, none of which I volunteered for, but that also didn't matter, right? So I spent lots of time writing thousands and thousands of OPRs, EPRs, PRFs, seeing all that stuff. So then, on active duty, there are some active duty folks that are assigned to the Guard Bureau. Did you know that? So some of the folks up there taking care of us are in the REGAF, and I was one of those guys working in Headquarters A8 as a major. Well, I started to help some of my bros there, brothers and sisters that were guardsmen, write OPRs and EPRs, and I realized that guardsmen, generally speaking, suck at OPRs and EPRs. And as I learned more about the Guard, I really fell in love with the Guard, which is why I transferred over from the dark to the light 4 years ago, joined the Guard in Texas, transitioned from the active duty. But what I discovered is there's a lot of things in the Guard that are difficult for us to fix. Because we're a traditional force, There's a lot of things that are more complicated for us than perhaps for our active duty counterparts. But this is one thing that I believe that we can fix, that we can make better with a little bit of elbow grease. So what we are going to do today is you flip open to the front page of your handout. You'll see this is a step-by-step guide. So I'm used to being in the flying world, and then I was a maintenance squadron commander after that. How many maintenance guys in the room? Got some maintenance dudes in the room? All right. Excellent. We have checklist procedures. You flip open the tech order, you fix it in this order, and the number one reason for jacking stuff up is not doing stuff by the tech order, whether you're in the flying world or the maintenance world or the support world. So what we want to do today is I have made a checklist for you to follow. So if you have not written hardly at all or written very often, I want you to be able to take a checklist and follow it through. So these slides we posted online, some guides we posted online, and you'll have all that on the SharePoint site, right, Colonel Botsford? Okay, go to the SharePoint site, whatever site that is, and you'll find all the stuff. So we want to give you the tools to be successful. Now today we are going to focus on how it is, not how we would like it to be. So how many of you, if I said something like, hey, when you write this EPR, I want you to make sure there's no white space on the form. The bullet should be all the way to the end. We should fill up every little nick and cranny on the space. Does anybody think that is just a little bit ridiculous? All right? Sometimes I think that's a little bit ridiculous as well, because we have to work harder to make those bullets fit and string them out and all those sorts of things. But we're not going to talk about how we wish things were different. Like, oh, well, I wish we could just do white space and call it good. No. Today, I'm just going to tell you, this is how the RegAF use an effective report. And throughout our careers, as we become more total force integrated, as we get closer, as we are now in the post-9/11 world, not a strategic reserve, but you've heard it before, a what? Operational reserve. Then we are more closely aligned with the active duty and work with them more closely than perhaps we did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So this is the way it's going, and we have to be able to adjust. Now you'll notice there are no patches on my slides. So as I mentioned yesterday to the officers, I have never worked in an FSS, and Lord willing, I never will. So I am not an A1 guy, I'm not an FSS person, and so what that will do for us today is I'm not only going to tell you what the AFI says. The AFI, the Bible for writing OPRs and EPRs, is AFI 362406. It's 317 pages. So there's a lot to read there. Chapter 4 is the EPR chapter. So if you're going to read one chapter, read that chapter, and so that's 50, 60, 70 pages, hopefully a lot less. But in that Bible, I'm going to give you a lot of the information that is presented there, and then I'm also going to give you a lot of techniques to help you with the process as well. So you'll get a little extra that perhaps someone talking in a more formal capacity, giving you more formal training, might not be able to. Next. So, oh, wait, go back. So I do, though, in all seriousness, I refer to your FSS and your A1 state headquarters channels for official guidance. So I'll give you answers here today. Please feel free to ask questions, and I'll give you my take, my thoughts. When we have some folks in the room here who can give you local guidance on the spot if we need it. But if you need official guidance, that's where you want to go for it as well. Next. So why do we want to write better? Perhaps I have a difficult job today, and like I said, convincing you that this matters, and it matters a lot. There are two preferences that I have when it comes to hiring people, deciding whether or not I want somebody to work for me, or whether I'm going to put somebody in a key position or give them a key duty or promote them. The first way that I do that is my personal knowledge of the individual. So how have they worked for me? How have they met suspenses? How have they done when they've had to stand up and brief people? All that personal knowledge I use as the first thing to make decisions on other people. Does anybody else in the room do that besides me? Do you do that too? Is that the first way you do it? For most of us, that's the first thing we go to. We take our own judgment and our own personal knowledge. The second thing that I prefer to do is pick up the phone, call somebody I trust, or look at them in the eye and go, hey, tell me if this guy or gal is worth getting promoted, whether they're worth hiring. Does anybody else do that but me? Commanders in the room, have you done that before? Chiefs? Absolutely. And that's why I love the Guards, because we know people, we know our Guard family here, and so we're able to make very quick judgments on people based on a long history. I don't need a bunch of extra paper to tell me what I already know about Joe Bob or Jane, right? So there are times, though, where there are limits to using that system, to using our time-honored Guard system of knowing our people, being personally connected with them. There are some times where you're not well known. If you go outside this wing, the 128th Air Refueling Wing, are you well known? Do people know who you are? Can people make judgments on you? If you go outside the great state of Wisconsin, are you well known? And my guess is in a lot of places you won't be well known. And so what do they have to go by if you're not well known? Only the paper that you put in front of them when you apply for that special stat tour, or maybe a special opportunity, or maybe some other job interview. And up until a year or two ago when we started this EPR process and got it kicked off, the Air National Guard was the only component, only branch that did not record a large population of its members in a recurring evaluation system, which makes it very difficult to make judgments on people when there's not some sort of paper trail there. So the Navy, the Army, Reserves, Guard, and the Army Guard, all of them were doing what we are now finally getting around to doing. So there are times where in the future it may matter in ways that we don't understand. So let me also ask you this. Have your plans changed over time? Has anyone in this room, you thought something was going to happen 5 or 10 years in the future, and now that you fast forward to 10 years in the future, what you thought was going to happen ain't happening? Anybody else besides me like that? I just turned 40. If I look back over the past 10 years, I never ever thought I'd be in the National Guard, and here I stand before you today in the National Guard, right? So we want to, that's for the camera, that was for effect. So we want to, we want to make sure that we just freely acknowledge that life happens and plans change over time. And sometimes, for many of us in the room, you have been here for many years. How many of you in the room, by a show of hands, have been in this wing for 10 years or more? Lord have mercy, almost the entire room raised their hand. And so for many of you in the room, you're probably thinking you will never go anywhere else other than this wing. You're going to retire here. And for a lot of you in the room, that will be what happens, and that is great. Because what we bring to the fight in the Guard is technical expertise in droves, and that's tremendous. But sometimes plans change, and I've had some sad stories where I've had Guardsmen that got to a place where all of a sudden a family situation occurred and they didn't want to be in the wing anymore. Or maybe they had a sick child and they were a technician, or they were a DSG and they decided, you know, if I could get a stat tour and get on TRICARE for 3 or 4 years, man, that would be tremendously helpful. And so they never wanted it before, and all of a sudden life changed in ways they never imagined, and now they wanted something different. So with that in mind, we want to make sure that that's for us. Our plans may never change, but there's something else that we as leaders in the room, so if you're an NCO or a senior NCO in the room especially, and as you look at the subordinates that you lead, you don't want to superimpose what your career goals are on somebody else. So for instance, is there ever been a stigma for those of you who are more senior in the room, for anyone that wanted to leave, it was kind of like, dude, you don't want to leave, that's bad. Sometimes that has occurred historically in the Guard. What we want to do is if somebody wants another opportunity somewhere else, they want to go on and be a stat tour member or go do this special opportunity at state headquarters, we want to encourage that and make sure that we don't hold people back just because that's not our career goals. And part of the ways that we hold people back in the future is by not doing these pieces of paper that are going to go in their records correctly. So with that in mind, Everybody heard of the 3-to-1 initiative where we have 3 components, the reserve, the guard, the active component? And this was a few Secretary of the Air Forces ago. He goes, hey, we need to streamline our personnel processes, make sure that everything fits into one regulation. We don't need all these different platforms and processes out there. So when I say what doesn't seem to matter today may matter a lot tomorrow, everyone in this room having an EPR in their records every year or every 2 years is a game changer. Let me say it again. Everyone in this room having an EPR in their records year after year or every 2 years is an absolute game changer. Let me give you an example of where that may come true. Fast forward 10 years. At the very least, everyone 10 years from now should have how many EPRs in their record? 5. Because at the very least, if you're a DSG or technician, you're getting one every 2 years. If you're an AGR or a Stat 2 person, you're getting one every year. So at the very least, I should have 5 EPRs in my record. Well, is anybody familiar with the Step 2 program where we take DSGs and say, hey, state headquarters will hand down an E8, an E9 stripe for competition? It is possible in situations like that, they say, hey, don't send us a package like you've done year after year. All we want to see are the individual's last 5 EPRs, and we will make a determination from there. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but the door is open for that to occur when we are all on the same playing field. So this could matter a lot more than we expect it to matter later. And for officers, for OPRs, every time we sit down at a face-to-face board, they look at our last few OPRs. That's part of the process. So because they know you, will it keep you from getting promoted to Master Sergeant? Well, they're going to look at the EPRs. And so it will be part of the process, and that's something to take into consideration. So I believe it's a leadership failure when the individual and the record do not match. So here's how it goes in the RegAF a lot. And I saw a lot of this. I'd see awesome record come over here to match up with a sucky dude. The two things didn't match. In the Guard, what I found is we have awesome person, sucky record. So I don't want you to write everything strong. I just want to make sure those two things match. So if we have exceptional people that are performing exceptionally, we want to make sure that that's captured in the record. If you have someone who is not cutting the mustard, I want you to do what your Vice Wing Commander just said, give them the hard feedback, and sometimes that hard feedback comes in the form of an EPR that reflects accurately their performance. Next. All right. So this is a chart that is a little bit dated, has years previously. It's the one we started out with as we began this process. But basically, for DSGs and technicians, they made this easy for us, and for AGRs as well. Everything has what's called a static closeout date. So you in this room, unless you get promoted, you know the exact date of your next EPR closeout because it's already mapped out. So unlike the officer system or what we used to do previously if you were in the active component, there were all different kinds of closeout dates. Well, instead now we have made it easier. So if you are an odd rank, so E5, E7, E9, odd numbered ranks, you will close out in an odd number year if you're a DSG or technician. If you are in an even numbered rank, so E4, E6, E8, you will close out in even numbered years. So are we in an odd number year or an even number year? Odd number year. So what's the next one that's going to close out? Look at the chart. You should see Chiefs in May. Coming up here later this month will close out. And then, for many more of you in the room, what will close out in September? Master Sergeant reports, right? So everybody should know when your closeout date is and track it from there. Now, what happens if you get promoted before the closeout date, generally speaking? Do you get an EPR in that new rank, or do you get an EPR in the old rank? How does that work? Some said old rank. Since I didn't immediately go yes, that's probably wrong, right? Okay, so good try. That would be intuitive. We go, if we spend a year and a half in a rank, that's probably what should happen. But no, that's not what's going to happen. These static closeout dates are a snapshot in time. So the rank you are on that day, that's the report you get. What if you change raters partway through? Snapshot in time, generally speaking, and there are some little caveats here and there. But everybody should get a report every 2 years, and so sometimes there may have to be an off-cycle closeout if you jump through some ranks to where you go more than 24 months, or if you're an AGR more than 12 months without getting a report. But generally speaking, this rank, this date, whatever you are on that date is what you get the closeout for. So the first step is just figuring out when your next EPR is going to close out, or when your ratee's EPR is going to close out, and keep track of it. So if you're an officer or commander in the room, we kind of have surges. So, you know, I had 170 folks in the maintenance squadron, 40-something E4 EPRs that would close out here in March, you know, last year. And so it was a big surge to get all that done. So on the drill weekend, around when these should close out, your commander should start receiving those reports on his or her desk. Next. All right. So now we get into this checklist thing where we're going to make a plan. So number one, the thing that will hose you entirely, if you flip open to the 910, that's the one that goes from Airman Basic to Tech Sergeant. So there are 3 different forms. There's the 910. That's the first one in your packet. And that is the one that is for Tech Sergeant and below. For Master Sergeants and Senior Master Sergeants, there's a 911. And for Chiefs, there's a 912. So if you're, how many Tech Sergeants and below do we have in the room? All right, lots of you. We're going to spend some time doing some force development today, because you're going to get to hear and see what happens at the later ranks, which is a place where you need to plan to be going one day. So hopefully, even though it may not be directly applicable to you today, it will be tomorrow, and so learning is good. So first we want to make a plan. So if you sit down, you pull out a 910, you pull it up on the computer, and then you hit, and you have a bunch of blank spaces, and you just start typing, that's going to be bad. What oftentimes happens, especially in the Guard, is the day before it's due, we go, oh, I got to fill out this form, and maybe I'll turn it in. And then you whine about why it's so hard. And the reason it's so hard is because you didn't do it right. You didn't start day 1 of the rating period. So if you are trying to capture 24 months of what's going to happen in an individual's career, their accomplishments, you can't remember what happened 22 months ago. So that's why there's a plan and some additional things need to happen before we start writing. So the next thing I do as a rater is I review the current record. I look at the stuff that's there, look at career briefs, see if there's any additional paperwork, and then I kind of determine where the airman's going. Is this an airman that is fast tracking to chief? Is it one that is on the eve of retirement? And so I kind of cage myself to know where the individual sits. Now, there's something in AFI 36-2406 that's relatively new over the past few years that we are required in all components to report any kind of criminal conviction. So if you break a law, in a criminal law in the United States, and you are convicted, not if you're tried, but if you're convicted, you are required to report that to your chain of command for guardsmen within 30 days or on the next drill period that you're in the status, whichever comes first. Now, I'm not talking about traffic tickets. Nobody cares about that. A traffic ticket, you're not required to appear in court for. But anything worse than that you are required to stand before a judge and be tried on, we are to report that. Now, I encourage, I mention all that just so you know, because that's something that is a largely unknown thing in our force that's a requirement for us. But if you are, you can consult with an area defense counsel before you make any reports. Make sure that you are abiding by the law and you're not doing anything additional that doesn't need to be done. But that's something I take into account. Any LORs, any letters of reprimand, any Article 15s. Are there any PT test failures? Those are things that I just want to know going into the rating period. Then I map out the next career steps. Where's the next place this individual could go? Next. Then I figure out, is there a way I can help the individual get them there? So can I push them for an early upgrade? Maybe early 7-level upgrade. Maybe I can put them in a different job of greater responsibility and supervision. Those are the types of things that we can certainly do. And this making a plan step, this step 1, extremely important for a DSG's EPR. So we have DSGs. How many DSGs we have in the room? God bless America. God bless you for what you do here in Wisconsin. Is it easy or hard to fill out an entire EPR on a drill status guardsman? Easy or hard? It's hard. Now, part of the reason why it's hard is because a drill status guardsman shows up to drill and does what we need them to do. And there's one thing that me as a commander, I needed my drill status guardsmen to do when they showed up. And that is prepare to go to war. Somebody said it, war. Prepare to deploy in combat, whether that be a domestic operations situation or overseas to Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever. So we have all these requirements. You got to do your LOAC training. You got to turn in your dental form. You got to make sure that your AFSC training is squared away so you're ready to do what we sit here in uniform to be able to do. So by the end of the drill weekend, you've done all that, and then you go home. There's some bullets you can glean from that, but not many. So if there's no plan, and that's you show up, and your drill status guardsman shows up weekend after weekend doing what we need them to do most, and there's no plan to have them work on this little extra project for 20 minutes, or help with this promotion ceremony for this upcoming chief, or help with this CDC tutoring project, or whatever, then there won't be much to put on the EPR. So I'm encouraging you to have a plan for everyone, but especially your DSGs to help them fill the report. So I'll let you read the far side, or the Dilbert there. Step 2, we're going to provide feedback and expectations. So I got to tell you, feedback's a tough thing, just like the big boss said over there. One of the things that I have that's frustrating, I have 3 daughters. They're a little older now, 13, 11, and 8. 3 or 4 years ago, it would be not uncommon they would be upstairs and they'd be playing a game. And then all of a sudden, all craziness would break loose. And I'd go upstairs, try to be a good dad, swack some kids on the head, all that sort of thing, try to get them. Then I'd figure out what happened. They start to play a game, they set some rules at the beginning, and then what happened halfway through the game? Somebody freaking changed the rules, and it ticked off the other 2, and it was just pandemonium. So when we do not set expectation, just like in the game my daughter was playing, my daughters were playing, success became a moving target. So one of the things that we chronically do badly at in the Air National Guard, and I would argue probably across the military, is having robust communication with the people that we rate. That is hugely important, and part of that is going, this is what I expect. Let me outline it for you very, very clearly. And so we have the ACA forms. How many of you have done an ACA, an Airman Comprehensive Assessment, on someone, on yourselves? All of us in the room now should have done that. So if you're a tech sergeant and below, that's 931, and if you're of a senior NCO rank, it's 932. What I would encourage you to do for raters in the room and for radies in the room is to walk through that form step by step. Have conversations, and have good conversations. Understand what your rater runs. Sometimes, as radies, we have to help our rater along to pull out of them what they should be telling us already. And so we can either hem and haw about them being a sucky rater, or we can try to be helpful in the process to get what their expectations are. So walking through those forms will be tremendously helpful. So one of the things I like to do is when those forms hit up there, is I've already done step 1, which was what? Make a plan. So I've already done that step. So I'll sit down with a new ratie and I'll go, all right, I'll look through your record. I've looked through all your stuff. These are where I see the next places that you can go. I really see that you have Chief Master Sergeant potential. And these are some of the plans that, if you're willing, might be options for you. And they haven't told me what they wanted yet. And then I ask, well, what do you want? Let's now talk about some of the things that you have in mind for your career. But for those of you who are in the ratie category, which is all of us, how many of you, if your commander or your chief or your boss did that, would that be meaningful in a positive way to you? Would that be meaningful, yes or no? Yes or no? Yes. Yes. That means my rater has actually taken time to think about what my next steps are, put it on a piece of paper to tee up for what we are going to do with the EPR. So this is not really an EPR brief per se. This is a leadership brief with EPR implications. Because if you don't do this stuff up front, then doing the EPR, which is merely a leadership tool, becomes a lot more difficult. So midterm at the halftime, and we want to note the date, put that date on the form. Now one of the things that we have on these forms is a lot of times when ARPC kicks back things, they kick it back for silly things that aren't correct. So if you give someone a midterm feedback, should that be within the rating period or outside the rating period? Inside the rating period. So if I give you a midterm feedback and your EPR closes out in May and I give it to you in July and I put that date on the form, is that okay, yes or no? No, that's not okay. ARPC will kick it back. So those are the types of things that we see a lot of difficulty from. So a little attention to detail is helpful. Now what we want to do at the midterm, really feedback, hugely important. And by the way, one of the tools that I love for feedback and setting expectations is this. How many of you have seen this before? All of you, right? Because this is what we beat into you as enlisted folks. Look at this, read this, do this. I don't go through every single one, but I really like opening it up and going, all right, senior NCO. Chapter 5 is your senior NCO responsibilities. Let me just give you one or two that matter a whole lot to me. All of them matter. This one matters the most. For me, mentorship matters a great deal. Deliberately developing junior enlisted NCOs and fellow NCOs. That is one of my huge focus areas. So that's how I use this book in conjunction with the ACA to sit down and give expectations and then give feedback. So what we should have with feedback is really constructive. A lot of times when I watch people give feedback, and you're right, sir, it is uncomfortable. How many of you want to sit down and tell someone that they suck? Does anybody want to do that? That's not on the top of my list, but as a more senior guy now, it just comes with the job. I have to sit down and sometimes give people tough things and make sure that they understand. So when you give feedback, you want to make sure that it's very specific and constructive. So I go, hey, Sergeant so-and-so, I think you can improve a little bit in meeting suspenses and follow through and follow up. On this date, I gave you this task with this suspense. The suspense came and went. I saw nothing back that says I need an extension, I'm having trouble completing that task. It just came and went, and I heard crickets, and the task wasn't done. And so what I need you to do there is to follow through, follow up with me, get the task done, or come back to me and tell me why we can't get the task done in the time I suspended it to you. So all that was very specific. There's no questions. I didn't say, hey, I just need you to kind of do better at your job. Is that helpful feedback? Hey, could you do better at your job? You're like, I hate you, boss. I mean, that's how that's going to work. But if you give very specific feedback, it will be better. So we should never also have something where there's a weak EPR at the end without some feedback in the middle. We should never have a situation like on Family Feud. Have you seen that old joke, Family Feud, with Richard Dawson, where they say, survey says, and then surprise, something pops up? We should never have something where we're sitting down at the table, it's EPR closeout time, and we go, hey, survey says, a referral EPR. And you're like, what? That should never occur, right? Because throughout the process, if things are not up to our standards or our expectations as raters, we should be giving that feedback. Does any ratie in the room want to know if you're not meeting your boss's expectations? Do all of you want to know that? Absolutely, right? So, if there's a warning shot across the bow that needs to be fired, I'd rather have that 6 months, 12 months early, and so I can fix it and then move on and hopefully have a successful, good EPR later on. Next, step 3, we're going to collect the data. Oh, by the way, what have we not done yet? We haven't written an EPR yet. We have not actually put pen to paper. And so, if you do not do these beginning steps, it becomes very difficult to do what we're going to do next. So that's why I'm spending a lot of time on these beginning steps. Because a lot of the frustration with writing these things comes with not doing the steps at the beginning correctly. So by the way, does all this stuff I'm talking about take lots of time or a little time? Is this a time-consuming thing, yes or no? Yes. But let me ask you another question. Are people worth this investment in time, yes or no? Yes. So are your people that you rate worth it, yes or no? Yes. Absolutely they're worth it. We have some of the most incredible Americans on the planet in the Air National Guard. and we want to take care of folks appropriately, properly, and then morale goes up, unit cohesion goes up, and people get good feedback, they know what's expected of them, and at the end, when they do a great job, then they get appropriately rewarded for it with a great EPR. So first thing, on collecting the data, I set the expectation of self-documentation. I say, you will write or collect all your self-documentation. Nobody knows what you do better than you. So I need you to write it down, keep track of it, keep running totals of it, and go from there. The second source I pull when I collect the data is things that are already written. So if you go to the desert and deploy, they should send back to this unit a deployed LOE, a letter of evaluation, an Air Force Form 77 that just has some bullets on it that you can take and transfer to the EPR. We should also have any award write-ups. Has anyone put in for a Saigon Award, 12 OAY? Anybody written any of those awards before? It's not double work when you write those awards because you can take bullets off of that award and move it over to the EPR, maybe massage them a little bit, and you get an already filled out EPR. I like to keep track of my notes, so for me as a commander, I supervised a couple chiefs, a couple officers, a first sergeant, those direct reports. I tried to keep track of what they did in case at the 11th hour they totally hosed me. At least I could put something on the EPR. Team bullets. You all just got done having a UEI last month, right? So did some good stuff happen in the UEI? Did you get some highly effectives? Or there's some good performers that came out of that? Probably so. On most UEIs, there's things that need to be worked on and some good stuff. So those are great bullets. Those are great things when you do something well here as a team. Where are y'all deployed to? I said Northern Moose yesterday. That's not right. Northern Lightning. Is that right? Yeah, all right. Northern Lightning. Okay, great. So Northern Lightning, big exercise, not Northern Moose. You come back, you help F-35 dudes do great stuff. Those can be bullets that really can be filtered throughout. So there were maintenance folks that had to chime in to make that work, some ops folks, support people that get to take credit when we take KC-135s, which is the mission of this wing, and do great stuff with it. So all of that goes from there. And then, how many of you have had some level of interaction with RegAF counterparts that are doing a similar job to you? Anybody through the past 10, whether deployed, home station? For a lot of us, we have some of the level of connection there. What you need to do for the RegAF folks, keep in mind, their whole world depends on them having great EPRs. If they don't have great EPRs, they don't get promoted. There are no slots. I mean, there are slots, but that's not how their system works. They meet centralized boards, they come out on a list, and that's the way it goes. So if their EPRs suck, they don't make E8, they don't make E9, they don't go through the system. So you want to go up to your active duty counterparts and say, hey, it's a total force. Why don't you total force me up some bullets, bro? Help me out here. And so, of course, be polite and professional, but you want to gather some stuff from them and say, hey, can you teach me here? Because you all are doing the same KC-135 mission as we are, and I just want to learn how you're capturing that and how you're writing that. That might be a very good way to help collect the data. So now we've collected the data, we move into step 4. So now we're ready to look at an EPR. So what we're going to do on the handout is I'm going to walk you through a 911 because it's the most complicated form, and then you'll see things that apply to the 910 and 912. We'll circle back around and hit the subtle differences in those. So if you look at the slides here, in Chapter 4 of AFI 362406, there's a table that goes through each of these blocks that tells you what to put in. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to hit the highlights. So the highlights are, in the rank, don't ever use Master Sergeant Select. Sometimes that can be confusing for us as guardsmen, but because we're going through a process of getting promoted, or maybe you were put in a Master Sergeant slot, but the paperwork hasn't gotten there to where you've actually been promoted. We don't use any of that. That's a RegAF thing. So whatever rank you are, put it in there. For this one, you can hook up with your officer's senior rater ID, same as the OPRs. Here, generally speaking, if you're an AGR or stat tour guy, you're going for the annual one. If you're a DSG or technician, you're going for the biennial one. Check it and move on. Let me also speak to this block that's relatively new on the form called number of days unrated. Let me first say that you as a rater just can't decide to do that. Oh, well, there's maybe 180 days that the individual, we don't need to consider what their performance was. We just brush that aside. The minimum level of that is a unit commander. So there's an approval process, memos that have to go through to do that. But what this is it allows for those that have been through maybe something difficult or some kind of reason why they don't need to be rated during a certain period of time. It gives us the opportunity to not count their performance during that period. Maybe they had some very difficult medical situation. So medical doctors would provide documentation, and then we would say, all right, for these 90 days, we're going to consider you non-rated. Another example the AFI gives is if one is a victim of a sexual assault. So keep in mind that different people transition from being a victim to being a sexual assault survivor at different times. So maybe we start out with 80 days, and if they need more time, then we give them that time. And then raters know that we are not allowed to count what happens or doesn't happen during that period of time. So what it does is it's for taking care of our members, but for almost everyone, this block will always be 0. Unless you have one of those extraordinary circumstances where we need to do it. And if you do, then engage your unit commander on it to figure out what needs to happen. But this is a good thing because it allows additional flexibility in our system. Next. Okay. I flip open to the back here. We have raters blocks. And by the way, these forms are a lot of packed in, so read the notes. So if it says something like additional rater, comments are optional unless it's required by referral. So if you give a referral EPR, that means comments have to go in here. If you don't have comments in there, they're going to kick it back. If it's not, then state this section not used. So if it's blank and you don't put this section not used, somebody's probably going to kick it back. So spend some time just reading the little notes that are buried in the form to make sure that you're on target and on track. That's a good little tip. When we get down to the 911, so for those tech sergeants below, this is what's coming next. There's quite a bit of an extra process. And a lot of this process is driven, by the way, by the fact that really the critical ranks to be promoted to are E8 and E9 when it comes to the Reg Aft. So they have a big centralized board process. They have board scores. They go through all this, and a lot of this process is driven by their requirements to make that process easy so they delineate performance from people. So this part at the bottom, unit commander gets to choose some future roles. You can't make veiled promotion statements. So for instance, I can't say, hey Master Sergeant, this Master Sergeant needs to be a command chief. Why could I not say that? Because it's way too far away. Master Sergeants are multiple ranks away from being a command chief, so that would be a push that would be kind of a veiled promotion statement. Now, this little block here, by the way, here for the more junior enlisted people, one day someone's going to ask you, do you have CCAF conferred or not, yes or no, on a form. So if you are a tech sergeant and you are not thinking about CCAF yet, I would start thinking about that, because let me tell you, it's extremely frustrating to have an exceptional performer as a Master Sergeant, then not have something like CCF done, and I cannot promote them to be an E8. That's a total bummer. Don't do that to us. We want to make sure that you get what you earned, but you got to do these things to make sure you get it. PME, of course, always an important thing. In whatever rank you are, if you are not engaged and have a plan to complete your PME, you're wrong. We need to get our PME done so that you stay viable for promotion. This block right here, when deciding whether or not you are promotion eligible, and this is the same way on all the forms, all you do is go, are you time and grade and time and service eligible? Only those two things. So don't say, hey, the guy just failed a PT test, so he's not promotion eligible, so I'm going to check this block. No, that's not the way it works. These are the only two factors you consider for this block on the 910, 911 that are for promotion eligibility. And then quality force review, this is normally done in the Reg Aft by a first sergeant, but their first sergeants are full-time, right? So we don't have full-time first sergeants on our side, So I'll leave it to your unit to decide how they're going to do your quality force review. But this is just asking, hey, is there any derogatory paperwork in their record? And it doesn't mean the form needs to change. It doesn't mean we need to put something on the form to indicate that necessarily. It just means that the unit commander needs to be aware if that's the case before he signs the form, he or she. So, there's the back. Next. Okay. So, the non-bullet blocks, don't mess them up. Go through the table, make sure that the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, so you don't get a bunch of forms kicked back, so the leadership can spend more time making the bullets better instead of hitting you up with, this is in the wrong format, this date is wrong, this thing is screwed up. Those should be clean kills that professional NCOs and senior NCOs should kick up to leadership. All right, step 5, writing the 4 duty descriptions. So I want to encourage you not to waste the space. Colonel Botsford, I picked on him a little bit yesterday. I said, hey, personnelist, I'm mad at you. I'm mad at you because you have only given me about 18 lines to talk about 2 years of all the great stuff I've done. And you just can't wrap up that quintessential awesomeness of me into 2 years and all that stuff into just 18 lines. There's not nearly enough space to talk about the awesomeness of my ratee, right? So, of course, I'm not mad at Colonel Botsford, but I want you to be in a different mentality. Here's the mentality that many of us are in the room, for those of us who have written a few of these before. Yeah, the mentality is, hey, if I just fill in the white space, I'll be good. White space. You know, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, if I can put that in there, that'll fill up half the line, it'll be good. Good to go, right? Or if I use some cool words like, you know, pure platinum, solid rock as a rock, silver surfer. I mean, who even knows what any of that stuff means? But I put it in the form, I call it good, right? So don't be in that mentality, be in the other mentality that is, I want to pack as much accomplishment and achievement into this form as I can possibly do. So you want to think about making radio calls, which the lines are short and concise. So here's a radio call, Cider 37, gear down, full stop, runway 35. I threw in no extra words. It was short, it was choppy, and we moved on from there. So we want to make sure that we are very concise and we're trying to pack as much stuff into the form as possible. So a lot of times that requires us to use acronyms and abbreviations. So don't spend 30 characters spelling out Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force when you can say the same thing that means the same thing that everybody knows in 5 characters. We want to really pack the stuff in. So what I've done is I've given about an 8 or 9 page informal acronym and abbreviation guide to you that will be posted on your SharePoint site that you can use. I realize that for guardsmen, deciding which acronyms are good and which abbreviations are not is a rather difficult thing. It's kind of an art. Because remember, the whole point is to communicate. So if you write a line and I don't understand what it means, then I'm just going to move on and I won't give you credit for whatever you are trying to say. So to take things like training, for instance, and boil it down to TNG, that little abbreviation, does everybody understand what that means? If you saw that on the line, would you get it? So that's what you want to be in the mentality. Some other things, if you try to abbreviate, maybe it wouldn't work. But use the acronym and abbreviation guide, and that will be a helpful tool for you. So, by the way, there's the 1 second rule. This is normally a RegAF problem, but if you try to cram in so much stuff that I can't understand what it's saying, and you're wrong as well. And we don't want to spell out common items. Don't spell out NCO. Don't spell out senior NCO. Don't spell out U.S. Air Force, all that sort of thing. Now when we write these bullets, now we're getting down to bullet writing. What we want to do is we want to start out with an action word. So, action words, manages, leads, directs, spearheads, executes, all oversees. All those words are action words. So, what I've also given you on the SharePoint site is a guide that's entitled Breaking the OPR Code. So, unfortunately, it's only for OPRs, but there's a bunch of attachments in the back. And so, the attachments are, here's a whole page, here's 100 action words. Just pull that out and choose one. So when you go, you click on that, you can read through the guide, you see some OPR stuff, a lot about stratification, other things, don't worry about any of that. Get to the back for the EPR part, and here's your page of action words. Here's your page of adjectives. And so you can use them. So if you have a little bit of extra challenge with writing, Chief and I were talking about this a little earlier today. This process, especially when you're not used to doing it, is not something you can just roll in, sit down, and do in 5 minutes, then go do something else. Oftentimes, especially for inexperienced writers, and again, this takes time, but what you need to do is shut your door and sit down for a solid hour, hour and a half, pull out my action word list, take the acronym and abbreviation thing, print that off, sit that on your desk, take the adjectives, print that off, sit it on your desk, and then sit down and go, all right, and take the data that you've collected to write your EPR, the data being those LOEs, the awards, the notes, the self-documentation. I set all that out, and I'm going, all right, I'm going to get in the zone, and I'm going to do this. And I can't answer the phone, I can't look at my emails, I'm just going to have to spend some time getting better at making this work. Does everybody understand that? So I'm trying to give you a mentality of success to make this work. So when you look at duty description bullets are what you do, what you are responsible for doing, not what you did. That's accomplishment bullets, that'll come later. So first you choose an action word, like the ones we said, oversees, manages, executes, innovates, whatever. Then you quantify what you did. You oversee a shop or responsible for 100,000 force support actions, personnel actions per year, or you're responsible for supervising 7 airmen to do this task. And so I spell all that out very clearly. And then I quantify as much as I can. Remember, we're the most data-driven technical service. So if I can quantify the scope, this is you are doing this support function for a 1,000 person KC-135 wing. Those are scoping the responsibility. You supervise for your maintenance guys here. Here's $1.3 million worth of equipment that you're responsible for on this account. Those types of things. Even if the number's smaller, even if it's $500,000, whatever it is, quantify it. Remember, we want to move on these forms from the subjective to the objective. We don't want to use vague, kind of happy, glad terms. We want to make sure that there's some meat behind what we're talking about. And numbers give you meat. Next. All right. So here's a few examples, and you'll see them on your forms there. These are some different ones. If you look at the duty description, those 4 bullets, keep in mind there's no repository for these. There's nothing that says, here's your 4 bullets for your job. No, because every job is specific. Everybody has different additional duties. And so the rater gets the opportunity to kind of scope how this goes. So don't be afraid to rewrite it. Now, there is something called the Air Force Enlisted Classification Directory. Has anybody seen that before? A few of us in the room. So you can get with your FSS, pull that off of VPC. It gives paragraphs of what your AFSC job responsibilities are. So you can use that to give you some wording to help you make this if you don't have it. Keep in mind you can always use the last guys as well, but don't be afraid to change it if you need to. Next. All right, so checking the boxes. So now we get into where raters have to make some assessments. So on the active duty side, there is a force distribution system. So that means if you get some all on the right side checks, that means you are in maybe the top 5%, 10%. Maybe this is the top 15%. So you're looking at really the top 4th getting these top ones. That's how the RegAF does it. Our system works differently. We work off these slots that you have to be put into. So our system's a little different. So we don't have that force distribution centralized system. But keep in mind, up here, if you check this block, the second one, that means that this part of the form down here will not allow you to fill it out. So the forms are smarter, so don't be frustrated if you can't type something into a block. It may mean that you have checked something that will not allow you to type it into a block, or maybe you haven't filled out something yet that will open that block. So a little playing around with the form would be helpful. So you can see different bullets. You can see how it's kind of packed together for those that have examples on the form. Let me also say that here, fitness is always a big thing for us. The AFI has changed recently to where if you fail a fitness test and your OPR or EPR closes out, it's not required that you get a referral EPR or OPR. That's not required anymore. The AFI has opened up to give commanders discretion to decide whether or not you are getting a referral report. Now keep in mind, if you're on a failed PT test, can you be promoted, yes or no? No. So no matter what the form says, you still can't be promoted. So the promotion eligibility for the Air National Guard still remains the same, but the AFI encourages your commanders and your leaders to ask 2 questions. For any kind of violation of standards, and I'm just using physical fitness because that's the most common one across the Air National Guard, is was the failure either significant or routine? Significant or routine? So let's take a routine example. So let me give you what, in my mind, as a former squadron commander, would be routine. If someone has 4 failures in a 36-month period, no matter how close they were each time, but there were 4 consecutive failures, does that begin to sound like routine to you, yes or no? I think most of us would probably agree that that is a routine failure that kind of lends itself to maybe a referral EPR. 4 consecutive failures, you've had 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years to clean it up, you haven't, that is probably routine. And by the way, as a commander, I'm required by AFI to make a retention recommendation up to the big boss to decide whether or not you stay in the Guard or not. Second would be significant. So this is some violation of standard that is so egregious that it's unbelievable. So let me give you an example for PT. Let's say they do the waist measurement, that ends up being like 48 inches, and then after that you go do 1 push-up, and then you do 2 sit-ups, oh, you're getting better, and then you do 25 minutes on the run. Does that, and you have no medical disqualifications for any of that. So would that be a significant PT failure? Yes or no? Yes, you scored like a 4, right? So that would probably be significant. So those are extreme examples, but those are the kinds of questions that you want to ask. So again, this is a leadership brief with EPR implications. So on your PT test, for those of you who are more junior, even if you, out of the chute, they do your waist measurement and you go, oh, I just barely failed the waist measurement, so I'm not going to try for the rest of the time. Don't do that. Don't hose it yourself. Keep going all the way through the test to the very best that you can, because that data in the gray area could matter and could make a difference between what could happen to you later on. Trust me, I know, I've looked at lots of these as a commander. So there we go. When it comes to other things that you put in there, the form gives you some great hints about what to put in which block, all right? Whole person values, consider all this stuff here. Personal and professional development, so those kind of lend itself to what bullets go in which block. Next. Sir? Very good. All right. All right, checking the box. No veiled promotion statements. So if you're going to get pushing for something, a push for something, let's say you're the NCOIC of one shop, and I want to push you as a tech sergeant to be the NCOIC of another shop. Same rank, I can always do stuff like that. That's your current grade push, but if I go current grade +1 on a future role, for this 9/11 form where this stuff exists, then you have to be fully promotion eligible to get that push. So if you're a tech sergeant and I put in your future role blocks, or if you're a master sergeant and I put in your future role blocks that you're going to be the section chief, which is an E8 job maybe, I couldn't do that until you were a fully promotion eligible master sergeant, because I'm pushing you for a job that's 4E8, so you have to be eligible for that job. Does everybody understand how that works? So very restrictive on a lot of the things for the EPRs, but it's really trying to weed out who is the best, who's in the tier 2 category, and who's in the middle. As you go down through here, promotion eligibility block is only time and grade and time and service as of the cutoff date. So the static cutoff date, that's the one that says you're eligible. So if you're eligible 1 month after, that means you weren't eligible as of the closeout date. Next. So for senior rater endorsement, which is only for the top 10% of master sergeants and the top 20% of senior master sergeants, and you have to have Senior NCO Academy done, CCF done, And then if you're ineligible for any of that stuff, either maybe you completed this stuff, but you're not a top 10% Master Sergeant as determined by the wing commander. That means a deputy, group commander, or vice wing commander will sign this block to close out the form, or your squadron commander will sign out the form. Next. Next. Okay. Write the bottom line. So this is some technique about how to write the bottom lines. By the way, I want you to view the form holistically. So you take all your accomplishments, all your stuff that you've done over the entire course of those 2 years, and you decide what is the most important stuff and put it in the most strategic places. So what would the most important stuff, which block should it go in? Should it go in your block on the front as the raider, or should you put it in the commander's block on the back side of the form? Which one? Backside commander. So higher ranking block, I'd put the most important stuff. That's how I would do it. Award, if you have some kind of award, I like to highlight those. That's a very objective thing. Maybe you were the Wing Saigon winner, maybe you were a 12OAY winner, things like that. Best accomplishments, and then if you have a next job kind of push, you can make that. Keep in mind the backside, most important part of the EPR. Next. So, and as you go up the form, you see the raider, the additional raider, the reviewer, the commander, they get very few lines, so put the most important stuff there. Next. Next. All right, next. Okay, so keep in mind that when it comes to stratification and promotion eligibility, there's only one person in this room, the wing commander in the back, that can make any promotion statements or give stratification, which is saying you're the number 1 of 12 Master Sergeants. That's a stratification. All of the ranks, all of the raiders, stratification is prohibited. So can I say any of this stuff? Can a flight chief say this? Say no. No! Can the wing commander stratify this staff sergeant? Yes or no? Yes. No! I told you to keep saying no, because the wing commander can only stratify a top 10% Master Sergeant or a top 20% Senior Master Sergeant. Can you write this? If you're the wing NCO of the year, you can say that, but can you say this part? Number 1 of 78 NCOs. No. The answer is no, yeah. World of no. Good, you got it. Got the sense. So a lot of those numbers that we used to use, maybe if you remember from active duty, a lot of that stuff has gone away and only focused on these 2 categories of people for the senior raider. Because what the system is trying to do is narrow down the very best performers so it stands out easily on the form. Next. Can a wing commander say this? Learning has taken place. Hallelujah. Yes, that is correct. A wing commander can say that. He can further stratify his top 10% Master Sergeants or his top 20% Senior Master Sergeants. Next. 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 Okay. So, but you want to focus on leadership best accomplishments next. Next assignment. So keep in mind, you got to be fully promotion eligible if you get pushed for the next one. You can't make pushes that are too far reaching. And then promotion pushes for everybody else besides the wing commander can't do. Next. Next. Okay, so PME pushes. Can I say send to Senior NCO Academy now, yes or no? No. No! Oh, great, we read the slide, awesome. But I can say any kind of official PME award you get, so if you win a John Levitot Award, you've got to make sure that makes it into the report. That's an essential. If you do the web-based Senior Enlisted Joint PME, you can capture that and say that you did it. Let me give you a couple bottom line examples here. So there's a couple of examples that you could use. Hey, I try to take some strong accomplishments, some mission-focused stuff, maybe some award stuff, weed them in there, and then you can see a senior raider bottom line example as well. But again, the senior raider, the wing commander, will take care of that part. When I send up forms to big bosses, I like to make sure that I kind of help them out, ghostwrite the stuff in there. And generally speaking, you can talk to your commander about it, but you should do the same thing. If you send me a blanket, and sometimes I got this from enlisted guys, they'll go, well, that's the commander's block. I'm not going to write anything in there because that's his job. Granted, that's what the AFI says. I totally got it. Yes, fine. But if you can help out and draft some language and help it be in there, that's a tremendous help. So I can spend a lot of time making that better, not trying to figure out what to write in there. As a technique, informally. Next. Okay, other two forms as we wind down to the end and talk about bullets, and then we'll be out at 9:30. For the 910, so you can flip open to page 2, see the 910, a couple differences here. You read the category notes on the front, decide what goes in which block, and then you want to make sure that if you're not promotion eligible, so if you're not time and grade or time and service eligible, you will not get a promotion recommendation from the unit commander. Now, even though we don't use the force distribution system, we should, generally speaking, try to delineate performance, because that's what the form is trying to do, is trying to decide, all right, who are the average folks, who are the most exceptional folks? And so you want to lay that out. No stratification, written promotion pushes should ever be used by anyone on the 910. 912, this is really a Reg-Av focused form. It really doesn't help the A&G as much, other than allowing us to capture a chief's performance. But the Reg-Av has a very centralized system where they choose their command chiefs, and a lot of what the new form does is help with that. But generally speaking, if you have an average to stellar performer, average or above, I would make sure, regardless of the form, that you try to fill in all the blocks. I know it takes more work, but that's what I would encourage you to do. For your below average guys, maybe not. Next. All right, 910. For FDID, just put in A in that block, and then remember time and grade, time and service only here. Next. We're not going to spend a lot of time going through the chief blocks, but for those of you who are heading there, pay service date for this little block, and the age you turned 60 for the high year tenure block over here is what we do for chiefs. Next. And then here's the format. I'll leave you to look at the slides, since most of us are not to the chief category yet. In detail, but basically there are 2 raters, 4 bullets up here for the rater, and then the senior rater gets to rate all chiefs, and then they have some categories to say you're ready now for a new job, you're on track for a new job, you need to stay in your current assignment, or do not retain. This command sergeant major block or chief master sergeant block over here, we don't use in the A&G because our system doesn't work that way. Next. So here's the definition for higher responsibility for chiefs. One thing I'll point out, that even if you give a chief a referral, EPR, and you say do not retain, it doesn't automatically not retain them for the commanders in the room. Just remember that we have a different process called selective retention, and that's how we in the Air National Guard decide whether folks stay or go, not by merely checking a block on a form. Next. Watch your words. Okay, can I say this? Yes or no? No, go back. Okay, can I say that? No, why not? So, do you mean this to be a good thing or a bad thing? You mean it to be a good thing. But whether it's favorable or not, you can't talk about gender, age, religion, sexual orientation, marital status. All that stuff is not allowed to work into the EPR. So, say something different. Just don't call her out as the first female selected for this job. Next. Can I say that on an EPR? No. What if I was awarded a Bronze Star? What if I actually got the certificate? Can I say it then? Yes, so there's a difference. If you're nominated, don't put it, because you make it a matter of record for something that is not a matter of record, but you can say if you actually got it, knock it out. In fact, I would encourage you, even though it's already in the record, to put it on there, because Bronze Star is a big deal. Next. Can I say this? So the AFI says, yeah, I mean, if it's a statement of fact that you're actually sitting in a chief billet, you might be able to say it. But could I say performing as a chief master sergeant? Could I say that? No, that is a veiled promotion statement. So generally speaking, I like to avoid most of this stuff, that anything that sounds like a veiled promotion statement. It's a difference in pushing somebody for the next level versus making veiled promotion statements. Say they're already performing like a chief, well, when they're not a chief yet. Next. Can I say this? On my EPR. No. Yeah, so you can't talk about civilian employment unless, and you can't make civilian pushes for civilian employment unless you have a tie to the military position with military performance. So how many of you have done Lean Six Sigma training in the civilian world or some kind of process improvement training? Got 10, 12 hands in the room. A lot of us have. Well, you could take that, use that training, and then talk about how you showed up at drill. You looked at a process that needed improving here in the unit, and then that makes a great bullet. Just say, I had this training, and here's how I utilized it in my military position to tie to some kind of military performance. So I encourage for civilian employment that's what we try to make those links so you get some level of credit. If you're a dual status technician, almost everything you do has direct tie to your military position and military performance. So you can use a little bit more latitude there. Next. Can I say this? No, I can't comment on enrollment in or completion of PME on the form. So this is the common thing that makes it to the form. Don't comment on it. Next. And the reason is because it's annotated somewhere else in the career brief. So that's already covered somewhere else. Can I say this? No. Nope, that's right. Next. Can I say this on the form?
No scores.
No scores? Someone say no scores? Okay, yeah. I can't say this. The only time I can talk about your PT score is if you fail. Isn't that a hoser? If you do bad, we can talk about it. If you do awesome, I can't put it on the form. What? So, but that's the way it works. So, you can, though, talk about PT program accomplishments. So if you led your squadron, because you're the PT monitor, to some greater level of fitness excellence, you can talk about all that. You just can't talk about your own PT score. Next. Can I say that? Would you want that on your EPR? No, all right. So I try to avoid using names or try to avoid getting overly imaginative or cute on forms. If I put this up 5 years ago, you would go, hey, Lance Armstrong, he's a great dude. Oh, that's awesome. But here you laugh because people make mistakes and they're human, so we want to make sure that we, and if you talk about generals like Petraeus or somebody else, I try to leave those names off the form because people are great generals. Sometimes they make mistakes, and so I talk CENTCOM commander instead of an individual name if I have the opportunity to do that. Next. 2 degrees of bad, 3 degrees of good. Very quickly, I just want to next. I want you to have a thing in your mind about, go ahead next, about the EPR. So 3 degrees of good, you have top tier guys, second tier folks, guys and gals, and average Joes. So in this thing, can you tell me for Raiders who your number one person is in your shop? Can you tell me who, those are 3 degrees of good. Can you tell me the 2 degrees of bad, who your weak swimmers and folks that are in trouble are? So keep in mind that half of us, by definition, have to be average. So the form is really designed, this whole process is designed to delineate performance, capture performance. So stratifications for master sergeants and senior master sergeants, senior rater marks, they should really go to the top tier folks. Promotion recs and pushes, top tier folks for assignment pushes. The 3 degrees of good deserve that. Awards, hopefully top tier. Maybe you can get some awards for average Joes folks. Word pictures and accomplishments. Everybody gets accomplishments, even if you don't do very well. You deserve for the work you did do to make sure that makes it on the form. So that's how you take the tools that the EPR has to offer and how you make it match up with where dudes rack and stack in a typical unit. Next. Accomplishment list. All right. Action word, accomplishment, quantifiable impact, the highest level. Next. Clear, concise, specific, using exact numbers, and we want to finish with a strong impact. So our impact is combat readiness and execution. So what we're going to do is I'm going to run you through how to write a bullet, and we're going to look at an example or two. So we start out with, you can start out with the zinger, like, so I'm kind of, master of, or tactical expert, or you can start out with that, but I like to try to get straight to the meat, and so I will use zingers, little introductory words sparingly. But you start out with that action word, and now remember it's in past tense, executed, led, spearheaded, oversaw, managed, whatever. Then you say what you did, hopefully with some numbers in there. And then the last third of the line should be the impact. So I'm going to run you through, because this is the toughest part for us to do, is oftentimes the impact. So I'm going to run you through how to think through capturing impact. And by the way, the strongest accomplishments you want on the bottom and in the back, as you work down the form. Next. So 8 ways to show impact. Next. So when you write a bullet, you say that you oversaw this process improvement, then what was the impact at the end? These are ways to show impact. So first way is operational requirements. Is there something that you did that you could tie to some kind of COCOM or combat nexus? Did you help meet a CENTCOM commander's goal? Did you enable 2,000 warfighters? Did we kill some bad guys indirectly because you refueled the fighters that took care of this tick, troops in contact, something like that? Those are all great things to use. And by the way, what's challenging is the limited space you have to work in. So if you take the last third of the line and have the impact, you have to say things very concisely to make it work. Second way to show impact on the back half of the line is higher headquarters. Higher headquarters sends out all kinds of written guidance. You get TAG guidance, you get Guard Bureau guidance, you get Air Force guidance. Here you get AMC guidance. And so if there's a way to say, hey, the President had a pivot to Pacific, I supported that with this rare refueling mission. Maybe you're in the FSS or some kind of support element. The Chief of Staff had some kind of message that went out and you got it out to the entire 1,000 person wing. Third way to show impact is mission stats. So ops, maintenance, support, we all have numbers that we use, 98% mission effectiveness rate. You can close that out and really talk about the impact of those. Next, fourth way to show is savings. So sometimes I may have to do a little fuzzy math. Let's say you do something, you change up something in your shop that will give you, on average, you think, well, I think we did this new process. I think it's going to save us about 3 man-hours a week. Well, let me see. 3 man-hours a week, that's like 150 man-hours a year. Maybe that equals about $10,000 in the typical technician's pay, maybe $5,000, maybe $4,000, whatever it is, maybe 3, 2, whatever. That'll make it up. And now I can have some fuzzy math to quantify the thing that I did to show some sort of savings. Now, what you need to be prepared to do if it's your boss asks, you go in and go, hey boss, this is how I got this number. I think we saved this much time per week. This is the annual total of that. I'm happy to change the number, but this is how I arrived at it. And almost every time, your boss, once he or she understands how you got the number, will be comfortable with it. So that's what I encourage. Next, remember we want to move from the objective to the subjective. Next is difficulty factor. How many of you have had to do something where you didn't get the resources the Air Force said you needed, but you did it anyway? All of us in the room have done that at some point. So if there's a way to concisely say that, certainly do that. And difficulty, every time you do something the first ever combat ops in Libya, first ever sorties in Syria, first ever quality control section in the maintenance group, or whatever. Those are things to capture. Direct comparisons are great as well. Hey, the Air Force average for this action is this. We're 30% above that average, or maybe we're 30% below, if that makes sense. You have AMC standards, NGB standards. Those are great things to compare to. Oftentimes we have senior leaders that come visit the wing. You should certainly take advantage of that. If they're walking around, you should listen closely to what they say. When they say, hey, great job here in this shop, you should put, V. POTUS, Vice President of the United States, said great job, and that should go on all the EPRs for that shop. Sounds a little ridiculous, doesn't it? But that's how it rolls, because in theory, big elected officials or big generals don't make those statements all of the time. Finally, award official recognition. Maybe it's not an individual award. Maybe it's some kind of team award that you could hit up for enlisted folks. Anytime you get a coin from a general or some elected official or something, some kind of recognition, I'd pump that into those EPRs. And if you had something to do with some type of team accomplishment, I'd try to figure out what you did. Maybe you were the guy that was the supply sergeant that helped out with this action that got this highly effective on the UEI. So I'd write a bullet, and the impact is you contributed to getting the highly effective on the UEI. So these are 8 ways at the back end of a bullet to show impact. Next. So let me give you a couple of examples. And by the way, There is no way I can teach you how to write bullets with you just sitting there and listening to me talk. I could talk for the next 20 years, and until you sit down and write the bullet and get bloody and try to figure out how to do it yourself, then you're never going to get good at it. Kind of like flying an airplane. You can watch videos about how to fly an airplane, and you'll never know how to fly an airplane until you actually sit down and try to get it done. So the first one here. Read the examples there. Actively dedicate to the pursuit of excellence, academic excellence, and completion of a degree. That's the first one. Or, do you like completed 12 credit hours with Touro University toward information systems management degree? 3.7 GPA. Which one would you like on your EPR? The first one or the second one? Second one. Why? We went from the subjective, lottie-lottie-lottie, I just had some diarrhea of the mouth, to I actually put some meat behind what I was saying. Here, another example, involved and dedicated to enhancing the base and local community welfare by freely giving time without expectations, supporting the 2012 Arizona Special Olympics. I'm tired, I can't even read the whole one. Supporting 450 athletes and 2,000 participants. Or, served as Special Olympics Committee Chair, rallied 2K volunteers, created a remarkable event for 450 athletes. Which one do you like better? The second one, right? So you can see some of the principles that we talked about being put into action here. A lot of times we like to write like this, and then when the line's full, we just stop. Instead, we take some extra work to figure out how to consolidate to write like this. Next. These slides will be on SharePoint. Here's a lot of examples from multiple career fields that show you all the things we talked about, and put those 8 things that you put on the end of the line, those 8 different ways that you can show impact into practice. I'll leave you to look at those later. Next. All right, so almost done. Keep in mind that until you sit down and write again and send it up and it gets marked up and it comes back, you won't be good at this. Next. Next. Okay, just click through these. Spelling, grammar, content. Don't send me stuff that's misspelled up to your chain of command. And make sure you're squared away. And do an intentionality check. Did you mean for this to be strong, or did you mean for it to be weak? I don't want every report to be strong, but I want us to be intentional. A lot of times we are very unintentional about how we do these. And these are OPR numbers, but about the same number of lines. I do a NAP check. I go, how many numbers are in this form? How many acronyms and abbreviations are in this form? And how many items of punctuation are in this form? So when you write, you start out with a hyphen, because it's mandatory to have bullet format. You put a space after the hyphen. Then after that, you start counting punctuation. So if your numbers are a lot lower than those, then you might ask, hey, maybe I need to beef up this form a little more and try to pack it in. Trusted peer review is good. Getting some feedback. Compile the EPR package next. And whatever the wing standards are here for you to send that up the chain. You'll get some editing back and forth, debriefing signatures, and you want to make sure you tell the rateee it ain't done until it's updated in your record. So if it's not updated in your record, you're not done. Next. Next. All right. Last thing is I want to tell you what you as a rater is your most powerful tool. It's this. It's your pen. If you're more senior, it has the power to bring a lot of pain, has the power to give a lot of joy, give raises, give promotions, give demotions, kick dudes out of our ranks, out of our force. You know, I've had a lot of raters through my career. I remember some of what they did. I remember some of what they said. But you know what? I remember all of what they wrote on my performance reports, because until the day I separate or retire, it will be in my record and will have some level of impact on where I go from here. So what I encourage you to do is to use your pen as a rater well and take care of your people, because our people are so, so worth it. All right, that's all I got. Any questions for me around the room? And I'll hang around afterwards if you want to ask questions too. Yes, sir, go ahead.
So, by the way a bullet is formatted, they're all going to be positive, but just to varying degrees then, right? Can you write a negative, or if you have a met some but not all expectations, how do you write a bullet for a below average airman?
So if you check that block, then you are saying that they have not met some standard, which necessitates it being a referral EPR. So then I am required to annotate why they have not met standards in there. So the most common example is the PT thing. So here I would say, scored a 70% on most recent PT test, which resulted in an LOR from the commander. And I go, but member, maybe I could even make a little positive spin to say, but member is working hard and making improvements. So and you don't have to say that last part, depending on how they're doing, you can decide where they are, but I have to give reasons for why they haven't met standards. So keep in mind that referral EPRs are the exception, not the rule. Even I have processed very, very few of those.
I'm just curious, because are the bullets meant to give part of that feedback? Even though you do it in ACA, with the EPR itself, are the bullets meant to give feedback both ways? Because I've never seen a sample EPR that's had a negative bullet on it.
So if you're going to put, so the AFI tells us that if we're going to put something that's directly negative into the report, that someone would want to have an opportunity to refute or comment on, then you got to make it a referral as it's a process. But you can make it weaker without making it negative. So for instance, if you have a lot of fluff, like some of those fluff lines you saw there, and it's fluffy, there's not a lot of substance, there's a lot of numbers, and you check the middle of the road, you check what would used to be a 3, that middle category, then you have made it just kind of a vanilla EPR that would be much different than checking the far right columns that they met on all the expectations and then some, and you need to promote them now, and then they have lots of great accomplishment and substance. So that's where we as raters delineate performance by those check marks and by the strength of the accomplishments that we put there. Now, even a weak OPR or EPR, if someone does something awesome, they deserve to have that captured accurately on the form. But that doesn't mean I have to fill up the form with all sorts of awesome bullets because they have some significant setbacks in their performance. Does that make sense?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay. Anybody have any more questions? We're at time, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I will hang around. My flight doesn't leave till 12:45, so I can hang around this room for as long as you want to answer individual questions. I really appreciate your time and attention. I know this is hard stuff, but our folks deserve to have this done right. Sir, over to you.